Hello, everyone. This is another answer to Christopher Wells dealing with definitions as far as laissez-faire goes, and as far as another term that he used, monopoly goes, because it's very important to understand what those mean to see why those things don't truly exist, um, except to say that government is a type of monopoly. But I would like to first say that laissez-faire, he's used the definition saying that it's an economic environment in which transactions between private or among private parties are free from government restrictions, tariffs, subsidies, with only enough regulations to protect property rights. That would be true if there is a truly laissez-faire economy, but a free market economy has no government intervention whatsoever, and that includes taxes. And so we were talking a bit about the laissez-faire legal period that's considered laissez-faire in the early 20th century, and that really is not very laissez-faire economically. The only thing that was laissez-faire uh, to the extent of the courts was they upheld certain types of private contracts, saying, well, that's their agreement that they made. Is that really an economic system of laissez-fairness? No. Why? Because you have to look at every other aspect of government. What were the local rules? What were the taxes? Because if there are taxes, you're not free market. And what were the other types of restrictions on every single level? City, county, state, federal. And if you look at that time, it wasn't a laissez-faire period at all. There was just a couple of different agreements that were upheld by the courts, that is the higher courts, that held up private agreement more strongly, um, and to that extent, okay, they acted more in the direction of laissez-faire, you can say, but it wasn't really a laissez-faire period in terms of what we consider to be true liberty. A closer one would probably be between 1817 and 1850, where there was no income tax, because the federal government basically was selling lands and doing tariffs for most of the time. That's a little bit closer, um, especially when it comes to restrictions on people, at Louisiana Purchase. In that environment, things are a little bit loose on the legal front, overall, but uh, still, it's not really that. And it would be a straw man to be like, oh, see, that's free marketism, or that's laissez-faireism, and there were bad decisions made then. It's like, nah. And in addition, whenever you do those things, you also have to account for general knowledge. And one of the things that people often fail to account for in general knowledge is they take the assumptions of a day and apply our present day assumptions to that time. And one of the things that was known, it was like pollution. And pollution and the understanding of pollution, what happens to the body, what happens with viruses and germs, that is a growth of scientific development. And the understanding of what counts as pollution grows with our understandings. And that might extend over time because people realize that certain actions are actually more directly affecting the health of others. You can't just dump a bunch of dead carcasses into a river, because that will have effects on the downstream in terms of potentially infecting people with deadly viruses, or making other types of really gross marks on other people's property. And that came from research and development understanding. It came from moving ahead, the ethics of human understanding and evolution in terms of what happens scientifically when certain actions are taken. And those are agreed on by libertarians. Libertarians are not pro-pollution in any way. They actually are the biggest haters of it, because when it comes to a toxic spill or something like that, that's a big violation of property rights. And so some of the things that happened during that time, with industrialization and growth, shouldn't be looked at as, oh, that is free marketism, or oh, that's laissez-faireism. That was a development and understanding of, oh, wow, we realize that you can't just dump these things because they do have a downstream effect, and it's measurable and it's proximate, and you can actually get very sick or damage physical property because of that. That came from learning. That came from human growth. That wasn't a characterization of the ethics or principles of liberty. Now, beyond talking about laissez-faire, the monopoly aspect is just he mentioned something about De Beers being a natural monopoly, and I have to talk about the definition of monopoly because very often people are confused about what that means, especially in the market. When you take away government, is it they're going to be like this monopoly thing where this one company owns everything, and there cannot be effectively a monopoly on anything technically unless somebody has 100% complete access to a resource. Why? Because monopolies, as far as forced monopolies, are only created through violence. Violence is unacceptable. That is, the initiation of violence is unacceptable under libertarian voluntarist principles. Government is the monopoly of violence. Government uses violence to maintain a domain over geographic areas and over certain types of resources. They limit and regulate certain types of products or technologies. So that is a monopoly through violence. A company that's given a monopoly because of government law through cronyism, rent seeking, that is another type of monopoly, but that is not through free trade, at least under the principles of libertarianism, voluntarism, and a natural monopoly couldn't exist except to the extent to say, okay, if imagine I had some unique element that was just discovered, right, and it's all in my hand and I own this, right, because I created it. Okay, well, I have a unique monopoly on this product, right? Because nobody else owns it. I'm super smart or whatever, and I invented it, and therefore nobody else has it. Okay, there's a monopoly. Does it exist in real life now? Why? Because anybody can use their natural resources under libertarian voluntarist principles to compete. And violence of the mafia kind is not acceptable. So unless somebody has a total market on a market ownership on a physical resource, there can always be competition potentially. There can never be an effective monopoly. There might be an efficient monopoly. That is, for a period of time, an organization might be able to maintain dominance in a market because they provide the best product at the lowest price. Um, but the second that someone can do the same and sell, and not even the same. If somebody even just sells one product and somebody buys it, the monopoly is broken, right? Imagine someone's like, "We are the best bicycle makers ever," right? And everybody's like, "Yeah, we're gonna buy from you." Awesome, right? And then somebody comes up with a bicycle, and another person in the world says, "Oh, I'm going to buy that bicycle. That's great. It's not made by this company." The second that that person bought that bicycle, that other company doesn't have monopoly. Why? Because the transaction just happened outside of that company. Therefore, logically, monopoly didn't exist. And of course, if we look at what happens in real life, people buy from all different places and sorts and stuff like that. Even if a company has a dominance in a market, doesn't mean that there aren't alternatives. An example, he says De Beers is a natural monopoly. It's like, thanks to synthetic diamond making, De Beers is not a synthetic. It's not a natural monopoly by any means, because tons of people can just make diamonds, through high pressure on carbon and turning it into its crystalline form. So there isn't really, in reality, a true monopoly. There are efficient monopolies, and even those are really subject to time and change and consumer desires and resources. Unless someone is able to own 100% of this one resource and keep it, monopoly just doesn't exist in that respect. So I hope that clarifies both the definitions on laissez-faire and really a more modern term for that's free market, because I want to really emphasize that laissez-faire is kind of like a direction. Free market is a description of saying there's no government intervention to those transactions. That includes taxes. So if you have taxes, free market. Boom, done. That's an intervention in terms of the cost factor, in terms of pricing. Which is why, of course, there's no free market in America. There's just highly regulated markets and the freedom to try to choose one of those highly regulated markets, generally. But in many cases, you might need a license or a permit to even engage in many things. So I hope that is a little bit more clear. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we can talk more. Take care, everybody.